first part to our reading session. I will list it in the description down below. You might want to check this because we moved a bit ahead in this story, but I will make a quick recap. So there was a man in a hotel, which is in Spain, in Algeciras, and this man was mad, maybe insane, we don't know. It's like a big mystery right now, and our main hero is really concerned about him being mad or something. But this man is middle-aged, and he tells us, our main hero, strange stories, strange events that he has witnessed. So, and we are moving forward. This chapter is called Strange Laughter in the Moonlight. But soon I discovered that Morrison was not drunk. He sat smoking his pipe and began to tell his story. I've been working here in Spain, said Morrison, for the Glasgow and the south of Spain olive oil company. I don't remember, I was reading him. He's a middle-aged, wrinkled man, so I guess I have to make him more grumpy. We have a new way of processing the oil from the olives, and we can sell it quite cheaply. And olive oil from Spain is just as good as olive oil from anywhere else. It's funny, but I have this association. Maybe you know this film. It's from Paul Thomas Anderson. It's called There Will Be Blood, and there is a main hero played by Daniel Day-Lewis, right? So I'm really bad at names of actors, and he plays with such mannerism each time. Each time it's unique and really outstanding, in my opinion. I think he's the best actor of all times. And in this film, There Will Be Blood, he's playing this kind of oil man, maybe oil, so you know, this kind of association. And he also is a businessman, and he also is middle-aged, and he has this grungy, deep voice. So I thought maybe this character deserves something like this. So I proceed. As Morrison spoke, I realized that although he was strange, he was not drunk. I still wondered if he was mad, but I sat back and listened to him. At first, went on Morrison, I lived in Sevilla. I don't know if I'm reading this correctly. It's a Spanish, maybe countryside or something. Sevilla is a port. Okay. Sevilla is a port, and while I lived there, I could look after the shipping. I was able to make sure that the oil was sent off in the ships to the right place at the right time. I suppose that is necessary here in Spain, I said politely in order to show him that I was listening. I remind you that our main hero, our narrator, isn't quite eager to speak with that man because he's willing to go, and he thinks he is mad, so he's quite uncomfortable by this conversation, although this man wants to proceed. So we have to keep that in mind. is this immediately. You are not in a hurry, are you? He asked quite sharply. He seemed determined now that I should listen to his story. No, not really, I replied. I'm not in a hurry, but it is late. It's almost 11:30. Well, it doesn't make much difference, does it? Asked Morrison. There is nothing to do here. You can only go to bed. I did not tell him that I wanted to go to bed. This is so relatable. I don't know. This is just... Instead, I asked him a polite question about his life in that lonely villa. I suppose you didn't see many people. Sorry, that was a line from our main hero, so I have to read it again. I suppose you didn't see many people, I said. No, I did not see many people at all, replied Morrison. There was an old man and his wife who looked after me. They lived in the villa and cooked and cleaned for me. But I only saw them when they brought me my meals. I made friends with a man called Fernandez. He was the chemist in the village of San Lorenzo, went on Morrison. I used to go down to the village in the evening sometimes and play cards with Fernandez and his friends. Occasionally I went out riding, and sometimes I took a gun with me and did some shooting. That seems to be an enjoyable life, I said, but Morrison did not listen to me and went on with his story. I lived in this house quite happily for about 2 years, continued Morrison. It was quiet life, but I became used to it, and I was fairly happy. Then the trouble started, and everything changed. The trouble started last spring, about 10 months ago. The trouble started with the heat. Last spring was the warmest in this part of Spain for many years. It was terribly hot. I took out a cigar and lit it. Morrison sat silent for a moment or two, and then he continued. It was so hot, he said, that the laborers could not work. They just lay all day in the shade of the olive trees and tried to sleep, and I found it very difficult to sleep. The house was so hot that I could not get to sleep at all. At night I just lay turning over and over in my bed. So, I live currently in a very, very hot country. And once I lived without a conditioner at my house, and it was terribly, terribly hard to fall asleep. So, also quite relatable. Oh no. So, I found a bedroom looking over the olive groves towards the north, said Morrison. I asked the old man and his wife to help me move my things into this room, and when night came I settled down to sleep. It wasn't any cooler in that room at all, went on Morrison. I read for about an hour and then got into bed and tried to sleep, but it was no good. It was still far too hot, and I could not sleep. I lay on the bed, turning over and over, until was a very strange laugh. It seemed to start near the bottom of the hill in the olive grove and then roll slowly up the hill. Nice. I leaned forward over the balcony and looked down, but I could not see nothing, even though it was as bright as daylight with a full moon. Okay. The laughter stopped suddenly, said Morrison, but I continued standing at the edge of the balcony and looking down. I was hoping to see someone moving, but I saw nothing. I stood for some time looking down at the olive trees, continued Morrison. I still saw nothing, and everything was very quiet. Then suddenly the laughter started again, but this time the laughter was much louder. It was a man laughing as loudly as he could. The laughter rang through the night. It sounded like a man who was very drunk. I wondered why he did not wake up the servants. I shouted out loudly into the night, said Morrison, asking who was there. But the only reply was burst of laughter. This was even louder than before. I began to get angry and thought of going down the hill. I wanted to find out who was making that dreadful noise. Then suddenly the laughter changed. Okay. It had been a deep laugh like that of a big, well-built man. Now the voice rose to a sharp cry. The laughter turned into a long, piercing scream. It sounded like the noise of a pig when it was being killed. I quickly left the veranda rail, went on Morrison,